Thanks for joining us on the show, diving into all things people, power, and politics. This is a special edition of The Pulse. I'm Roop Raj. It has been a heavy week of news, and we hope you're finding some moments of peace, some moments of comfort. We say every night to toss that phone aside and get out of that social media echo chamber. I don't know about you, but I'm ready to toss that phone aside for a little while. It's even more important tonight on this program. It's a day we remember and honor the lives lost on September 11, 2001, a tragedy that forced us to put our differences aside, regardless of politics, religion, race, or gender, and come together as Americans. And a day after political violence rocked our nation, it's unity that's needed now more than ever. Yes, even those who vehemently disagreed with Charlie Kirk should realize it was the murder, the assassination of a fellow American, period. Yes, even as he said many things that people shook their heads at, he was exercising his very freedom of expression, our right to do that. And the right to do so is something we all hold close to our hearts and should never have to die trying to do. We're having a conversation about civility with Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Dingell and Republican Rocky Richkowski, two people who may disagree on policy and how to get things done, but who agree that we are greater standing together even when we disagree than when we're apart. We're also asking Congressman Tom Barrett what he thinks needs to be done to cool down the temperature in our country. All of that coming up. Ceremonies across the country honoring the nearly 3,000 fellow Americans who died on September 11, 2001. This was in New York City, a bell ringing at 8:46 a.m., the time the first plane hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center. That bell did ring at that hour. A second bell rang at 9:03 when a plane hit the South Tower. There was a reading of the names honoring all of the lives lost that day at the World Trade Center, Pentagon, and on Flight 93.
To every member that still feels the void every day of your lives, the First Lady and I unite with you in sorrow. And today, as one nation, we renew our sacred vow that we will never forget September 11th, 2001.
President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump taking part in this ceremony at the Pentagon, where 184 people were killed when a hijacked plane hit the west side of that building. The American flag was unfurled on that side today.
Confronted by an unprecedented situation, united as one, they drew upon a reserve of inner strength to face that challenge. It is our duty, and indeed our honor, to do all we can to meet our own challenges with the same spirit of strength, unity, and determination demonstrated by the 40 heroes that morning.
Christian Adams.
And in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, a reading of the names and wreath laying where Flight 93 crashed. Crew members and passengers, you may remember this, stormed the cockpit to try and take control from the hijackers, a flight believed to have been targeted to head to the White House or the Capitol.
Today we remember the nearly 3,000 lives lost, but we also honor the bravery of first responders, the resilience of survivors, and the spirit of a nation that refused to be broken.
And in Detroit, a memorial service held at Campus Martius Park. The ceremony not only honored the lives lost, but the first responders from Detroit who rushed to Ground Zero to help on that horrific day. Now to the latest in the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. So much thrown at your news feeds, hard to tell what's real and what's not. And that's why we're here. Let's begin with the FBI. What we know now, releasing these photos of a person of interest in the deadly shooting over at that college campus in Utah. You'll remember just a day ago, FBI Director Kash Patel said a person was in custody, but after they were interrogated, that person was actually released. Today on Capitol Hill, lawmakers on both sides came together to condemn the violence.
We're just here as a group to say America cannot govern itself this way. We all have to speak with one voice and find the person who did this and bring them to justice.
Political violence should be condemned and stopped, no matter what your politics, no matter where you are on the political spectrum. Violence has no place in America.
And we're going to talk more about that civility in a few minutes here with our panel. But right now, we want to bring into the fold someone who knows a thing or two about how this case may move forward. Former U.S. Attorney Matthew Schneider. More on that investigation and what will happen after they catch this guy, and they will. And Matthew, we thank you so much for joining us. I want to begin by asking you a little bit about this particular part of the conversation, about the political temperature. Even in your role, you, of course, watch so carefully how that temperature goes up and down. Do you think that this could be a way to perhaps bring down the temperature? People kind of do an about face about how they're acting towards one another?
Well, it certainly could be a catalyst for that, and we need all the help we can get. You've got two great guests on your show, Rocky Ruskowski and Debbie Dingle. I mean, they know civility, and they've done that. We need more people like that, people who actually practice it. So it's one thing to be able to talk about it, and we've done this so many times. There's a tragedy in the country, somebody's assassinated or shot or attacked, and people talk about civility. You know, we should be talking about it before that and right now. That's really when we need to do it. So it's incumbent upon all of us. We're the ones who can put this into practice.
Reposting, resharing things that you don't know are true, spreading hate on social media, all things we have control over. So we certainly hope people will do the right thing. Let's talk about this case now, Matthew. How do you see this thing moving forward? And kind of like, you know, lift the curtain for us. We understand there's a person of interest. We keep showing that person's picture. Is it likely that's the same person who they're looking for, who they believe made this tragic shot?
So that's a possibility, but that's not the first thing I thought of when I heard of this. A lot of people heard of this and they thought, who is this crazy person who did the shooting and how did this happen? Well, I thought of, is this a conspiracy? Is there more than one person involved? Is this a coordinated attack? And I also thought, are there other targets? Are there other people that are going to be under the microscope or under the shooter's scope? And that's the first thing I thought of. And I know that law enforcement right now, that's exactly what they're concentrating on. They're not only trying to track down this person, but they're trying to find out whether or not he or she is associated with anybody else, and whether or not there's any other nefarious activities being planned.
Matthew, talk a little bit about what these investigators are saying right now and what they likely mean. They're saying that the person who they found perhaps crawling on the rooftop just a day ago is someone that they believe they know, but they're not saying just yet.
Oh, I can guarantee you they know a lot more than they're leading on to. And there's good reason for that. For example, we know that a weapon was found. That's what the media reports are. Now, once you find a weapon, you can extract DNA off of that, maybe fingerprints. You can get other connections. You can run that serial number. They're going to be able to track that down very, very quickly. And of course, there's cameras all over this campus. There's traffic cameras. There's cell phone footage. There's cell towers that they're probably pinging and identifying off of. There's license plate readers. So there's so much more information right now that the government knows, but they can't tell us that because it's in the middle of their investigation, and they don't want that to blow any of their leads.
When they finally catch this person is going to be facing a very uphill battle, and it's going to be something that we'll watch carefully. Talk about the punishment.
Well, certainly we're looking at either federal charges or state charges, no matter what. These offenses that apply, a murderous act, a crime of violence, we're looking at a possible punishment of life or the death penalty. And that could apply because Utah has the death penalty, and there are federal statutes that could apply here. They're like terrorism type statutes. If you use a weapon, you cross state lines, you use it in furtherance of a crime of violence, or even to violate somebody's civil rights. This person was acting out on his First Amendment speech. That's exactly what was going on, and he was murdered for it. So because of that, there are other federal statutes that could apply and be charged in this case.
As this conversation continues every day with the coverage, we want to continue our conversation with you. We hope you'll come back. Former U.S. Attorney Matthew Schneider, thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you.
We're picking up the civility conversation next with Congressman Tom Barrett, what he's doing to lower the temperature in the discourse, and also the office that he's running for, his plans in the state of Michigan. You're watching The Pulse on Fox 2. Back now on a special edition of The Pulse. Thanks for staying with us. Here to talk about what America should do to lower the political temperature, as well as his re-election bid for Congress, Congressman Tom Barrett. It's good to see you. Thanks for joining us, Congressman.
Appreciate it.
We have to begin with the news of the day, the news of the week. We talk a lot about lowering the temperature in this country, and you saw what happened, of course, with Charlie Kirk. Your thoughts on how we start to do that as a leader in Congress?
Yeah, I think it starts with, frankly, more conversations and more openness and more willingness to talk about the differences that we have. We can try and pretend we don't have differences, whether that's in politics or any other facet of our lives, but we're America. We have a lot of diverse viewpoints. We have a lot of difference of ideas and thoughts. A lot of that has been more vigorous over time, and we've become more polarized as a country and as a society. But I think having more conversations that are more genuine in nature and not telling people, hey, you can't talk about that, or you can't say this thing, or you can't have this discussion because it might be a little bit uncomfortable. I think we need to have those uncomfortable conversations because they actually really bring us together in the end if we're doing them in a genuine sense of pursuit of understanding one another's position. I spend time with people in Congress every single week that I have genuine and sincere disagreements with, but I actually find them to be overall, especially in private conversations, very respectable and very understanding of one another's viewpoint. We're not necessarily going to convince one another of our differences or of our opinion, but I think it's something that we got to get back to. We got to get back to having hard conversations and real discussions with one another. And then the other thing I'll say is, from a standpoint of faith and what we believe in, I believe that God created each of us in the image and likeness of our Creator, and I think we need to see that more in one another, especially when we're having these disagreements. And that's something that I hope we can get back to.
Well, I certainly do. And maybe taking that political correctness down a notch instead of being afraid to have a conversation.
Yeah, it puts up barriers where people are uncomfortable saying anything that is remotely controversial or remotely something someone will disagree with. It's always easier to say nothing, and then that then swells over time. And ultimately, I think we need to have more of these discussions that are maybe a little uncomfortable for people.
One comfortable conversation that the president has is about what he plans to do when it comes to National Guard troops. It's an uncomfortable conversation for the governor of Illinois, who believes that this president is overstepping his powers. What are your thoughts on taking the National Guard and going in to fight crime in cities across America?
Yeah, I spent over 20 years in the National Guard, about 20 years in the National Guard in my 22-year-long military career. Most of my full time was spent overseas on deployments, and certainly reflective on that on a day like today, like 9/11. But I can tell you, I was on standby more than once when we would have concern about potential for civil unrest back home in Michigan even. So these are things that happen. The National Guard is able to back up law enforcement, and when it's in pursuit of a federal purpose, then the president has more broad authority. We've also seen the outgrowth and the outcome of this in Washington, D.C., a city that was really ravaged by violent crime, that has had a substantial decline and drop in violent crime since the president got involved with the National Guard there, backing up the local police. And the local police and mayor are understanding now of the law enforcement effect that the National Guard has had. We're not there to weaponize or occupy communities, but the National Guard can be used as a tool to really back up law enforcement.
But it's interesting because if two young people are fighting in any given city, Chicago, Detroit, wherever, what power does the National Guard have to break up an argument between Jimmy on the city's east side and Carl on the city's west side?
Sure, and that may not substantiate the involvement of the National Guard, but the National Guard can be there, number one, as a deterrent, right? So just being there with a physical presence is a deterrent for crime in and of itself. But then further than that, what we've seen is a lot of harassment of federal law enforcement, especially on the immigration enforcement side. And that then does become a federal issue. If you are assaulting, harassing, or intervening in the pursuit of legitimate federal law enforcement exercise, then that becomes a federal interest at that point.
If someone is hurting an ICE agent, then the Fed should get involved.
A street brawl between two people maybe doesn't necessitate that involvement, but I would bet that there would be a deterrent effect, and any individual can reasonably intervene to protect, the interests, the physical interests of another.
Your military background has influenced deeply how you live your life and how you value this country. You've taken some of that expertise and have applied it to a bill to make sure that our airspace is a bit better. We know what happened in Washington. Give us an example of what that bill is all about.
Yeah, that was an outgrowth, really, of my experience. I flew Black Hawk helicopters in the Army. I had more than 1,000 hours flying helicopters in my career in the Army. And when I saw, like all of your viewers and you saw the tragic collision that happened over Washington, D.C. airspace, I wanted to do something about that. One of the things that came out of that was the understanding that the collision avoidance system that our civilian airlines have is not present on our military tactical rotary wing aircraft. And that was something that I thought was a gap and an oversight that likely could have or would have prevented this accident from happening. I sponsored a bill to begin the process of upgrading our military fleet to have that same collision avoidance system, because the system itself doesn't work unless both aircraft have it installed. So one alone having it isn't enough for it to work properly. We got it into the National Defense Authorization Act in the House. It passed yesterday.
Which is big.
I'm proud that it was included in that, and it now goes to the Senate, where we're having discussions about keeping
I do
it
have
in
to
the
ask
bill.
you one more question. The big, beautiful bill and the Medicaid issues, what will you do to make sure that no one slips through the cracks in rural areas and in big cities across the state?
Yeah, well, we invested heavily in rural hospitals, for example, to make sure that they are being addressed properly, because rural health care is far more stranded. But then we also looked at coverage of people that we want to make sure that Americans who are working hard and paying taxes feel appropriate that the benefits are being given to. So we're removing those who are illegal immigrants from the rolls because they don't have a reason to be covered. Those that are duplicatively enrolled and therefore,
Sure.
over enrolled in different states, ineligible people are removed. And those, and then we added very modest but meaningful work requirements, not because we want to punish people, but because we believe in the dignity of work.
And that is something that's a piece and a part of it. And I know that we are out of time, but I want to say thank you, Congressman Tom Barrett. It's good to see you here tonight on The Pulse. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for
running
having
for
me.
Congress for re-election. We're picking up the conversation about civility and ending political violence after the break. You're watching The Pulse on Fox 2. Back now on a special edition of The Pulse. Thanks for joining us this evening. Here to continue the conversation about civility and our political discourse, Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Dingell and former Republican State House Majority Leader Rocky Ruchkowski, who's also a commentator, regular on The Pulse. Both of you, we thank you for joining us. We only have a few short minutes, so I want to begin by really kind of digging into this. We have polarizing ends here. On one end, we talk about 9/11 24 years later, and we talk about how much more in common we have as Americans. But this comes a day after a political assassination of an activist. Congresswoman Dingell, you've always talked about reaching across the aisle. You've always talked about civility. What is it that's going on right now that's causing all this to happen?
It's going to take longer than the time we have to talk about what's happening in this country. But what I want to say tonight is that we all have to de-escalate the rhetoric on all sides. It isn't, this political violence has to stop. Just look at the number of shootings this year. It's scary, and our democracy is under real threat by what we're witnessing right now.
Rocky, you and I talked just the other night, and Congresswoman, you and I talk about this as well. When you look up videos of, I don't know, lasagna on Facebook, what happens to your feed? It gets filled with more lasagna. You look up puppies, you get more puppies. If you're looking up and commenting on divisive posts, you get nothing but that. It builds an echo chamber, and for those who are lonely at home, it builds a new reality. Rocky, this is a problem, right?
Absolutely. But beforehand, Debbie and I were actually talking about this. Some of those posts are political. And yeah, I have Republicans and Democrats. Yeah, and there's and a lot of bots that say, we should do this, we should do that. I get it. But a lot of those are also ads, and they're bought by foreign nationals, Russians, Chinese, Iranians, that would love to foment the fierceness of an argument that tears apart the fabric of our country. Yesterday I mentioned
and it's working.
It is, but at the same time, I come back to a positive. Let's try to have a little bit of optimism tonight. And that optimism is, remember what happened on September 12th. That was my favorite day next to Christmas, my birthday. Because September 12th, there were no Republicans or Democrats. We were just Americans. That one day where we were attacked brought us together. Now, it's sad that an attack has to bring us together instead of having a conversation. Because Debbie and I ardently, we are cats and dogs.
Diametrically opposed
politically,
right?
On most political issues.
Not as much as people think, but.
Are you becoming a Republican?
No.
Wow.
Are you becoming a Democrat?
No, God, no. Please don't hurt me.
You know which we both are, and we know we're both Americans.
That's true.
Better believe it.
And I remember, I got to tell you, I sent Debbie a text because I was at the VA and I took a picture. I was getting a treatment at the VA because I'm a veteran and a combat guy, and I took a picture of John. because John was the guy that bent over backwards and made sure that I got to the VA. And I'll never forget that. And he was a Democrat.
Congresswoman, your late husband, you, Rocky, you've done this for a long time. So we have the people at the table that are doing it the right way. And I'm sorry, there's no other way but the right way. This is the right way to have civility. What do we do to bring the temperature down right away? We talked about social media, but Congresswoman, what else is there out there?
Well, first of all, we all have to condemn violence. I think violence is never, ever okay.
You can't celebrate the death of Charlie Kirk like some people are.
I cried.
On social
You want to know
media.
the truth? I cried. I didn't sleep last night.
Yeah.
What I watched and witnessed on the House floor, like yesterday, deeply disturbed me. And
I'm glad you said that. I appreciate that.
It was both. It wasn't one side or the other. There's just so much emotion. We've got to de-escalate the rhetoric. I have great friends that are Republicans or Democrats. I'm not afraid to stand up for what's right on the issues, but political violence, violence of any kind, is not the answer, and we all have a responsibility to stand
Rocky,
up to hate.
what do we do to
what do we do
to stop the desensitizing? Because here's the problem. If you think about this year alone, we have had the Minnesota lawmakers that were shot. We had Josh Shapiro, the governor's house in Pennsylvania, burned. We had Charlie Kirk killed. Last year, President Trump as a candidate was shot at. These are 4 incidents. Yet we kind of report it and we
there's
move
a lot
on.
more.
Listen,
but there's more than that.
But mental illness does not have a political party. Mental illness does not have a political party. We, Republicans and Democrats, need to focus and make mental health a priority again. We've seen what decentralizing mental health at states and national level has done. We may need to come back and work together across the aisle. And Democrats are going to have to give and Republicans are going to have to give. But mental health and mental illness, because there's a lot more Americans and a lot more mental health issues. But let me give you the quick antidote to this. And I know that I'm going to get a lot of hatred from both Democrats and Republicans on this.
It means you're maybe doing something right.
You want to solve the problem of political discourse and the issues that we've got? Get money out of politics. Get money out of politics today. That's the biggest problem we've got.
Congresswoman, when you look at the situation as it stands right now, right away, after 9/11, we saw people come together. What is it that we can do to remind people of that day that you want to recall?
Well, we've all been talking about it today and reminding people. I think that social media, COVID, and the isolation is disconnecting us, and that we all have a responsibility to try to bring people together and also to stand up to hate whenever and wherever we see it. Period.
And don't reshare and repost things that you don't know are true. This is a very critical part. We all have responsibilities here to keep that civility driven in our homes. And we thank you both for doing that and modeling that for us. Rocky Rushkowski, Congresswoman Dingell, thanks for your time. That is the pulse for tonight. Thanks for joining us. I'm Roop Raj on this night and all nights. It was good to be with you. But today, as we grapple with violence and divide, we remember how the country came together on this night 24 years ago. All of us wishing for one thing: peace, something we hope you'll find tonight. Have a good one.